The amazing thing about visiting Washington is the fact that all museums are free. There are so many museums to come and visit. However, we've found ourselves in one museum that's not necessarily free, but for a news program and a news organization. This is something that we thrive on, and we really are looking at the history of news, the development of news, and how stories are reported on here in America and, of course, both globally as well. Well, joining us now to talk a little bit about this, I've got the public relations manager here, Jonathan, to talk about Newseum, what it's all about and what you guys have got on display. Talk to me about Newseum. Just give me a little bit of background.
So you touched on it a little bit. What we really are is a history museum, but the way we look at history is through the lens of journalism. So we're finding the people who were on the scene when things happened 100 years ago, 200 years ago, really all the way back to 500 years ago in some of our exhibits. And we talk about what they saw.
I mean, we're standing right now at probably one of the biggest news events of our time, and that, of course, 9/11. You guys have managed to also, besides capturing how it was reported, I mean, you've got pieces from the 9/11 tower right here behind us.
Yeah, what you see behind us here is the top 30 feet of the broadcast antenna that stood on top of the North Tower of the World Trade Center. And what this exhibit really examines is, there are plenty of museums that look at the firefighters and the police officers and obviously the people who were killed that day. What this museum and this exhibit examines is the reporters who told their stories. And so there's a fantastic film here called Running Toward Danger, which is something that, like firemen and police officers, journalists also do, to find out information, to report facts, to tell people what's happening. And the film focuses on the journalists who told the story of the fall of those towers.
It's one of the most touching films I've ever seen, and footage that I've never, ever witnessed before. To get your hands on that must have been, it's a heartbreaking thing to watch. The people we were watching with actually walked out crying.
Yeah.
There's a section here that actually has a map, and you'll see that. That's what we're talking about on your screen right now. It's a map that basically divides the world into those countries that have got complete freedom, those that are partially free, and others that are completely not free. But South Africa, partially free, how are these results gathered?
So we work with an organization called Freedom House, and they essentially do an audit each year of countries from around the world, and they look at levels of press freedom. They look at who owns the media, and are there laws that protect journalists? Are journalists being targeted for the stories that they report? And then about once a year, usually right around World Press Freedom Day on May 3rd, we repaint the countries that change colors. Yeah. And usually it's somewhere between 6 and 12 countries that change per year.
Photographs as well. I mean, that's definitely a very moving photograph, and certainly in the streets of South Africa.
Sure, James Nachtwey shot that photo in a place called Sniper Alley in South Africa in 1994. And in the foreground here you see this truck that's Time magazine photographers used in Bosnia. It was obviously hit by some shrapnel. It's actually, in fact, not bullet holes, but a small, basically roadside bomb went off and launched some shrapnel into the side of the vehicle. Fortunately, they all lived.
This section is very moving. I mean, taking a look at all of the journalists that have died in the line of duty.
Yeah, this is our journalist memorial, and this is where we rededicate the names of journalists each year who were killed while reporting the news. Yeah. So you can see here a list of the names of journalists who were killed in 2014. And usually around World Press Freedom Day, about the same time that we rededicate the World Press Freedom Map, is when we will update this memorial. Here what you see is a list of names of people who've been killed in South Africa. So what we can do on this digital kiosk here is sort essentially by where people were killed. So we can go over to S and pull up South Africa, and you see the list of names here.
This one here, Ken Oosterbroek, which we do know. I mean, the Star 1994, shot and killed on April 18th during a crossfire in Tokoza Township. When you talk about photography and you say that one photograph is worth 1,000 words, I mean, it's so true. And you come here into this Pulitzer Prize photography section, it's unbelievable. I mean, this is still one of the most emotional photographs ever. South African photographer Kevin Carter.
We watch as visitors come into this space and look at many of these photos and read precisely kind of what happened and why it's such a newsworthy story to tell, and many of them break down in tears and cry over this photo and many others in this exhibit.
But there's also another South African photograph here, and I mean this. It's exceptionally hard to look back on this time in our history in Soweto, South Africa, 1990, and this is Greg Marinovich who took this photograph. Marinovich also made it back to his car when this all happened. He closed his eyes and began to beat the steering wheel, saying he could finally scream. So when we say that it's very, very hard sometimes to not take things personally as a journalist, I mean, I think this rings true. Imagine being behind the lens of that photograph.
Yep.
Sure. Let me tell you something. If you're ever in Washington, D.C., that is the one place I can recommend. I mean, I know there are so many places to visit there, but that was one place you can spend. And in fact, we went there 2 days in a row to try and get that insert to you. And sure, it was so emotional. It's very hard not to have tears walking out of there.